today's session, how to find product market fit quickly. My name is Daniel Nzueto, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's session. If this is your first time attending one of our workshops, let me provide some context on Startout. Startout accelerates the growth of the LGBTQ+ community to drive our economic empowerment, building a world where every LGBTQ+ entrepreneur has equal access to lead, succeed, and shape the workforce of the future. I'm excited to introduce our host for today, Nelly Yusupova. Nelly's a co-founder and CDO of Wellbeing Inc., a leader in providing effective tools for boosting employee well-being. We're excited to have you back for our third part of the series, Nelly. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I am going to share my screen and we'll get started. I want to confirm that you guys can see the screen.
Confirmed.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, as Daniel mentioned, I am a CTO and a co-founder in a well-being startup. I am also the co-founder of TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs, which is an organization where I teach a lot of entrepreneurs on how to find product market fit quickly. And a lot of the things that I'm going to be teaching you today is from real world experience. I've done this and worked with early stage startups for over 18 years, managed teams and projects. I've heard my share of horror stories and have taught my process to over 1,200 students so far. And I've, again, everything that I'm going to be teaching you is from personal real world experience, and want to make sure that you walk away after today knowing exactly how to reach product market fit. Now, as I'm going to share all the things that we're going to learn today in a second, but I just want to make sure to underline that the process that I'm going to be teaching you is going to be mostly focused on software products in tech. But if you are not in tech, and raise your hand just so that I can get an idea if you're not in tech. Everything I'm going to be teaching you today applies to any type of business that you run, even if it's a service-based business or product-based business or hardware type business. So you can take those ideas and apply them to whatever business that you run. All right, so let's keep going. This is what we're going to learn today. First, we're going to define what is product market fit. There's a lot of definitions. A lot of people understand it in a slightly different way. So we're going to get on the same page on what it means and why reaching product market fit is such an important milestone for a business. We're also going to learn 2 pillars that are necessary for reaching product market fit quickly. Then I'll share with you the product market fit framework that I use and teach to entrepreneurs. We'll talk about the role of metrics to prevent us from going in the wrong direction for too long. I'll also share some additional resources for those of you who are interested in next steps, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So if you have questions as I'm talking, feel free to drop those in the chat. And if they're relevant, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. I'm going to try to. And there is also a workbook that goes along with this. Daniel, if you can drop the link for people to be able to download that. Excellent. And I provided the workbook so that you guys don't have to take feverish notes, but pay attention. And I'm going to be asking you questions and testing you. And if there's anything that I say that you are not clear about, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. I may or may not be able to answer it right away, but at the end, hopefully by the end of the session today, we will have all of your questions answered. All right, let's get going. So what is product market fit? There is obviously the product side and there is the market side. On the market side, you need to aim to do 3 things. You want to identify the exact early adopter customer who has the biggest pain point for the problem that you want to solve. And you need to validate that the customer problem is not just valid, but it is also high enough that the customers are going to be willing to pay you with time or money, and ideally both, to solve those problems. The key here And the goal is to find out that people are willing to pay you with either time or money or both. And when I work with entrepreneurs and companies as a consultant or advisor, what I see a lot of entrepreneurs do is solve level 5 or 6 problems. When you do the market side well, what I'm suggesting that you do is you find level 12 out of 10 problems. These are painkiller problems that people actually need solved. Because the higher the pain point, the more likely customers will be willing to pay you with time or money, and ideally both. Let me ask you a question. Let's say you find a really amazing painkiller problem that people actually need solved, but you don't have a customer that is willing to pay you to solve that problem. Do you have a business? Type your answer in the chat. You have an amazing problem that you found, but you don't have customers that have the money or willing to pay you to solve that problem, right? So people are saying no. Absolutely. You don't have a business. Maybe you have a nonprofit. Maybe you have a very expensive hobby that you're funding yourself, but you don't actually have a business until you find someone, anyone, even if it's not directly your users or your customers of the product, to pay for it. So that's why it's so important in the beginning, which is why I always teach entrepreneurs to start with the market instead of the product, so that you can identify people who have really high problems, and then the solution that you need to build them to help them solve that problem and provide value is going to become very, very clear, right? So now validate that the customer problems are real and also high enough that someone is going to be willing to pay you with time or money, and ideally both. And lastly, you need to define and refine your value proposition. What does this mean? You need to answer questions like, what makes you unique? Why should people pick you over the competition? And are you clearly communicating the value to potential customers in a way that they resonate with? This is really, really important to get right. Even if you were able to create a product that solves a painkiller problem, if you're not able to communicate the value that your product provides effectively in a way that your customers understand, then they simply won't buy. A big mistake a lot of customers, a lot of my students make, right, is that they launch a product, they think it's amazing, but they still cannot sell it because they can't communicate the value in a way that their customer understands. Okay. On the product side, there are also 3 things that you need to focus on. The first thing you need to do is to actually build the exact combination of features and services and functionalities that solve your customers' needs and keeps them coming back to using your products over and over and over again. This is where a lot of people also get stuck. They build the perfect product, right? Or sometimes a small version of that product called the minimal viable product, or the full-blown product, and they say, yay, we did it. They start celebrating, right? But the key here is to continue to refine the product until you have the exact combination of features and functionalities that make your product delightful. So launching the first version of your product is the first step. You need to continuously learn, refine, and iterate on the product over and over and over again until you find the exact features and functionalities that will provide value to your customers, so they continue to be a customer and they're actually happy to pay you. Yes, I said happy. They're happy to pay you with time or money to use those products because you're actually solving real problems for them. You also need to refine your product's user experience to make sure that your product is intuitive and is easy to use. And of course, you also need to find and work with the right team to optimize your team's execution. Otherwise, you will not be able to satisfy your customers' needs fast enough. Even if you have, again, an amazing idea, people want your product. If your team cannot execute fast enough to satisfy their needs, you're not going to be successful. So once you have found the exact target market that is willing to use your product on a regular basis and is also willing to pay you for it, you have found product market fit. You have found the formula for acquiring customers in a cost-effective way that are willing to pay you for the product or service. And this is the funny part. I always laugh at it, and raise your hand if this is you. Drop an emoji in the chat. Most entrepreneurs think and hope that their product market fit journey is going to look like this. A straight line to success, and it's only going to take 1 or 6 months to get there. Right? This is what most of us, when we're starting out, we think, and because we're so optimistic. In reality, this is what your path is going to look like. And it usually takes more than 1 to 2 years to reach. Here you see the frequent pivots that you might have to do. Some would be small, some would be large. Most of your pivots, hopefully, will be small. And with small pivots, you will be focused on optimizing your product for retention. It's all about understanding what new features and improvements to the product experience and functionality would make the product stickier. So more and more of your existing customers use your product on a regular basis and also recommend and refer new users to you. The big pivots are the most painful, the most time-consuming, and the most expensive. This is where you might realize that you need to target a different customer segment or a different industry, or you might even realize that you need to solve a completely different problem altogether. Hopefully, you won't have to do more than a few big pivots, but it is totally normal. And actually, it is expected for early stage startups to make pivots, right? The key here is to learn quickly and pivot before you go in the wrong direction for too long, because the longer you go in the wrong direction, the more time, money, and resources you're spending, because eventually you realize that you need to come back and redo and upgrade. But the longer you go in the wrong direction, the more expensive it is. So it's normal to make pivots. Your job is to figure out when to make the pivot as quickly as possible. And this is what we're going to learn for the rest of the session. Now, I have another question for you. Why is it important to get to product market fit quickly? Why is it such an important milestone? Type your answer in the chat. Why is getting to product market fit quickly such an important milestone? Save money, quick revenue. Yep, Josh. If looking for investors, signals adaptiveness, start to utilize, oh, this is going too quickly, capital more efficiently and effectively so you can begin to scale. Todd, all of those answers are correct, right? But I think Todd hit it right on the nail. To me, reaching product market fit means that you have a repeatable way of acquiring customers in a cost-effective way. And now you are ready to scale your business. And we want to be able to do that as quickly as possible. Before product market fit, you're not really a business. You're trying a whole bunch of stuff and you're figuring things out. But once you have found product market fit, now the market is pulling you and you now can scale your business. Okay. And we, as entrepreneurs, we want to get here as quickly as possible, which is why this is such an important milestone. To me, this time, once you find product market fit, is an optimal time to raise venture capital money so you can pour gasoline on a fire to grow quickly, because you already figured out, right? The fire is already burning. You know that if you put in X amount of dollars in, this is how much revenue you can expect to make. Does that make sense? Very, very cool. All right, so let's keep going. To get to product market fit faster, you need to increase what I call product velocity in your startup. And contrary to its name, product velocity is not just about building a product quickly. Product velocity is the CEO's ability to align their entire startup team to focus on the right goals at the right time, so you can quickly and efficiently learn who is the exact target market that is willing to use your product on a regular basis and is also willing to pay for it. It's about your entire team, your tech, your marketing, your sales, your business development, and so on, being able to work together and execute quickly in an iterative way to actually build a business around the product idea, and not just building a great product, which is what a lot of people do. They want to build a great product, but in order to build a business around the product, that involves your company being able to iterate both on the product side and the market side at exactly the same time. Okay, this is a very, very important point, so I'm going to repeat it. In order to build a business around your product, that involves your company being able to iterate both on the product side and the market side at exactly the same time. Most people only iterate on product side, and then they go out and try to figure out who needs the solution, right? This is, to me, is backwards. So start and make sure that you can do both. And the way you should structure your teams to be able to do this should be different than what is traditionally being done. Instead of having siloed teams of sales, marketing, business development, tech, QA, analytics, you should have smaller teams that have all of those roles working together on delivering the product. Teams are responsible for the market, your sales, your marketing, your business development people, and your product managers, developers, project managers, etc., working together so that they have full visibility into the entire product lifecycle and be able to focus on what matters and iterate a lot faster. Does that make sense? This is such an important point because everything I'm going to be teaching you for the rest of the session builds on this. So if you're with me, buy into this thing, give me an emoji or a high five in the chat, and we're going to keep moving. Okay? I like this. Awesome. So this is very an important process to the lean product development thing that we're going to be talking for the rest of the session. Excellent. All right. So what is the process for reaching the product market fit quickly? We know that we need to get there quickly. So what is the process? To do this, we need to understand two core pillars that are a part of my product development process that I teach entrepreneurs, and then we'll actually go into the 10-step process. So the first pillar is learn early, learn often, and learn cheap. The second pillar is executing ideas the lean way. Learning quickly is really important, as we discovered, because the faster you learn something, the faster you will learn if you head it in the right direction. You don't want to spend a ton of time and money going in the wrong direction. And what is the difference between the classic versus the lean way of building products? Let's first consider the classic way of building products, because that's what most people do, and then we'll learn the alternative. So in the classic way of building products, you come up with your idea, you get excited about the possibilities, and you start painting the picture in your head about how this new shiny functionality will change everything for the business. If only I had this, I will have more customers. Raise your hand if that was ever you. And the more you think about the possibilities, the more incredible and flawless your idea becomes, and the more excited that you get. Me, right? I'm guilty. All of us are. So what do you do? What do you do? Of course, you put all of the resources behind building this amazing functionality that will change everything. You spend 2 to 6 months to a year building in secret your functionality because you don't want anyone to steal your brilliant idea, and then you launch. So you've just committed 6 months to a year or even more of money, time, and resources, and then you get feedback. You may have hit it exactly on the nail, and maybe it is an amazing success that you've imagined in your head. But what most often happens is that you discover that not many people buy, or that it was not a problem worth solving, or you built the wrong solution, or, so many ors. This approach is like shooting arrows at a target with blinders on. It is a big bet, and it is high risk. It's slow to market, it has zero customer validation, and it's very, very expensive. On the other hand, we have lean, which uses scientific methodology of hypothesis, test, learn, revise to discover what works with a lot less waste. In the lean process, every single brilliant idea that we have is actually a hypothesis. It is an assumption that has to be proven right or wrong by talking to customers and getting insightful feedback, which allows you to learn whether your hypothesis is valid or if it needs to be revised. And then you create a new hypothesis that needs to be tested again. And everything drops into a lean development cycle of hypothesis, test, learn, revise, hypothesis, test, learn, revise. And the goal of your team is to minimize the total time through the loop by learning as quickly as possible. This word learning comes up over and over and over again. We discussed the importance of learning quickly. The faster you learn something, the faster you will learn if you head it in the right direction. So basically, in the lean way of building products, your startup is actually just a series of well-designed experiments that you are constantly testing so you can adjust your path to success. And this is the key. The smaller your experiments are, the faster you can test and learn whether something is working or not. So instead of taking this long approach to figure out whether something is going to work or not, we are taking lots and lots of small steps to get to success faster. And I hope you can see why these two pillars are necessary to getting to success faster without wasting time and effort going in the wrong direction. And I want you to think about how you can use and leverage these two pillars to get to product market fit faster. How can you minimize your learning time? How can you build less code if you're a tech startup? How can you launch faster? What experiments can you run, right? How can you make your team more efficient at executing? Because all of these things will help you iterate a lot faster. It'll help you learn a lot faster so you can reach product market fit faster. Type yes in the comments if you agree that these two pillars will allow you to learn and iterate a lot faster so you can reach product market fit faster. Because next, I'm actually going to break down the exact process that I teach to allow you to learn early, often, and cheap, so you can efficiently iterate through the product development process and optimize your team so they execute like a well-oiled machine. So this is the 10-step process that I teach, and I actually color-coded it here so you can see which steps map out to the product and the market scenario that we talked about. So the first step, validate, is the only one that maps to the market, and the rest of the steps are all about the product. So let's break them down and see what they mean. Okay, so step one is validate. So this is where you will refine all of your ideas, which are what? Who can tell me? Starts with an H. All of your ideas are what? Large or small? Hypotheses, that's right. Excellent. So all of your ideas, no matter how large or small, you start out with a hypothesis, right? So it'll allow you to identify your target customer, validate that the customer problem is really big, and help you refine your good ideas to make sure that they are painkillers. It's not enough to have good ideas for products or features or functionalities or services. Every one of your ideas must solve a painkiller problem and not be a vitamin. Because if people just want what you're building but don't actually need it, you will always have a much harder time getting your customers to use and pay for your products. The number one reason why products and features fail to be adopted, it is not because they couldn't be built, but because no one wanted them in the first place. And a lot of people make the mistake, if they do validation at all, is to only do validation at the beginning when they're coming up with their idea. What I'm saying here is every single idea for a new feature or functionality or service, no matter how large or small, before you actually invest a lot of time and money into building it or creating it, has to go through a validation process, because that will help you really understand if you're solving a painkiller problem or a level 4 or 5 level problem. And is this functionality going to add to the overall value of your product and services so your customers would be happy and willing to pay you for it? There's some of my students actually never build any new functionality until they go and sell it to potential customers, even if they already have a product, right? So this is almost like starting with the sales first, right? And that will help you understand what people would be willing to pay for, and is this a valuable investment? So you would refine your idea through a process called customer development. Customer development validation is getting out of the building. I'm sure you guys have heard of, maybe not. For those of you who have, Steve Blank talks about customer development, getting out of the building. This is not doing surveys or focus groups. This is getting valuable insights, talking to customers one-on-one, right? And there's a very specific hypothesis testing process with potential customers. And these interviews are designed to remove the guesswork and assumptions from all of your ideas before you build them. And founders always tell me, Nelly, I talk to customers all the time. But if your questioning is not aligned with specific hypotheses that you want to test, then you're just asking questions. You are missing out on a lot of real nuances and gems that can help you refine your understanding of the problem and therefore help you build the best solution to address those problems. Proper and focused customer development will prevent you from building technology for technology's sake. It will allow you to also learn and understand how to market and sell to your customers, how to acquire customers, your sales and business model, and so much more. To me, validation is probably the most important step in the product development process here, because it will literally help you define the market in the product market fit scenario that we talked about. And if you do this first before you put the resources into actually building something, you will save so much time and money, which is why it's the first step. Great. Step number 2 is prototype. So now you understand what problem you're solving. Now you need to come up with a potential solution, right? And this is where you will refine your solution. So instead of jumping into code, which by the way is a way of prototyping, but it is the most expensive way to do so. Clickable prototypes are on the other side of the cost spectrum. And not only is refining solutions using clickable prototypes cheaper and faster than writing code, prototyping will allow you to test multiple solutions before you write code. Remember, it is a lot cheaper and faster to rapidly change prototypes than it is to rewrite code. And just guessing what solutions will resonate with your customers will always result in rewriting code and take more time. So some of the tools that you can use to build clickable prototypes are Adobe XD, Figma, Sketch, Marvel App, InVision, etc. And just to be clear, a lot of people may be familiar with no-code tools. Even if you're using no-code tools, you should still use clickable prototypes to refine your ideas, because clickable no-code tools is still writing code. It's just a little bit faster than writing code manually. Does that make sense? So clickable prototypes, very important to be able to test out your solutions, seeing something work in action right before you invest a lot of time and money building it. Steps 3 to 7 is where you're going to be planning and preparing for development. And instead of building your entire idea, you need to define a minimal viable version of the prototype that you created in step 2. What most people do is reduce the number of features or functionalities from, let's say, 20 to 10. It's a good first step, but it is not enough. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever wondered how the same exact project can be estimated to cost $10,000, $50,000, even $150,000, and all 3 estimates for the same exact project could be completely legitimate? How's that possible? Think about that. And it's because the details of what and how you build something matters a lot. We just mentioned no-code tools, right? Versus custom coding everything, right? There's going to be a huge price difference. And so what I always tell founders is that you must plan MVPs, minimal viable products, based on your time and your cost constraints. So you can launch quickly and inexpensively, and you don't build more than you have to. And in order for this to work, your development teams, whether they're in-house or outsourced, need to be trained in how to build products in this way. Your team needs to understand how to make decisions from the learn early, learn often, learn cheap perspective that we talked about. And most technical people, unfortunately, are very uncomfortable in doing this. In fact, the more technical you are, the more you have to retrain yourself to think this way. You want to build the perfect solution that scales to millions of users, or use that shiny new technology that they want to learn and get experience in, and not necessarily what's best for your business at this point in time. But what you need to do is figure out what's the most minimal viable thing that you can launch as quickly as possible, and then refine, scale, and iterate from there. And if you're not working with teams who know this process, it's very important for the CEO of the company to learn this process and make it a part of your company culture, and train everyone on your team, and also hire with this process in mind, because this is the only way you can get it to work. So I'm going to share a story of a company that I just onboarded. They have 10 people. And earlier I told you that the way that traditionally teams work, right, is that they have their siloed departments, but this team all wanted to learn this process. So they already have a startup, they already have a product, and they wanted to transition to this lean way of building versus the traditional way that they were using. And they made the decision, right, to not only train their technical people, but they also wanted to train their salespeople and product people and the CEO, so that they can all create a culture, so they all speak the same language and understand each other's work, so that they can all see the entire process and work effectively together. That is why it's so important for the CEO to buy into this and then make it a part of the company culture. And by the way, not everyone is going to be well suited for this type of culture of constant learning, experimenting, and uncertainty. So if you already have a team and find that even after training them, certain people are just not a fit, you might have to make the difficult decision to replace them with someone who is. It is it's a must, right? Like very, very important to hire everybody who buys into this process and also thrives in this environment. Okay. Yes, I think we do have a recording of this, absolutely, and it will be shared. Great. Let's keep going. So steps 8 and 9 is all about managing the coding and deployment process to your customers. Again, this is where you will use agile project management to make sure that you can deploy code quickly and efficiently, and have the flexibility to be able to adjust the product roadmap if the need arises. The idea here is to increase the rate at which you are releasing new product features or improved functionality. I get you from releasing every 3 to 6 months, from every 3 to 6 months to 2 weeks, right? So 2 weeks release cycles is what is a standard for agile project management. But I want you to, for those of you who are already doing agile project management, I want you and challenge you to go to 1 week release cycles, to multiple times a day product releases, right? Because launching early and often will allow you to learn and iterate a lot faster. I just, how many of you have heard of a company called Etsy? I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, right? It's a ginormous company now. They started in New York City, and they were using similar processes, very, very lean company. At 400 developers, they were doing up to 250 deploys a day. Isn't that amazing? Their process was so dialed in that they can make so many deploys a day. And the benefit that they got was all the data points from which they can make better decisions the next day, right? And that is what I want you to aspire to do, because the more often you release, the more you are actually seeing your product in action, and that will make a huge difference for you. And finally, step number 10 is all about setting up behavior analytics. So instead of guessing, you can use data to make product improvement decisions. This is where you will need to implement analytics and start to collect user behavior data that will help you learn how your users use your product, what features and functionalities they use the most, what delights them and what makes them frustrated, what brings them back to using your application over and over again, and why they might not be coming back as often as you'd like. All of these data points will help you make decisions. Which one of your existing features needs to be improved and how? What new features and functionalities would make the product stickier so more and more of your existing customers use your products on a regular basis and also recommend and refer new users to you? Data-driven decision-making to improving your products is absolutely transformational, because instead of guessing what exact features to focus on to get more users to use your product, you will actually have data that will inform you on what next functionality that you should be testing and implementing, preventing you from spending a lot of resources and time building the wrong things. So here in step 1, we're validating your ideas' riskiest assumptions with a small set of your customers. This is where you're talking with them one-on-one. You're collecting and gathering feedback to reduce your assumptions. Here in step 10, we're now scaling your learning with a bigger subset of your customers. And from the data that you collect, you'll get ideas on how to improve your product. And these ideas on how to improve your product are what? Who can tell me? Most people look at them, they're like, oh my goodness, I have an idea. I see it in my data. I'm going to take it and I'm going to go build it, right? And they go and put it into step number 8 and 9. And Arena said hypothesis. Absolutely. These ideas are hypotheses. These are assumptions. We're not going to take them and put them into code, which is what most people would do, right? Even though your data is telling you, we're still going to assume that it's an assumption. We're going to put it into step number 8 so we can understand the nuances around our discovery, right? We need to understand how our different types of customers experience that problem. And that is why we put it back into step number 1, which is validate. We learn as much around the problem as we can, and then we go through the 10 steps continuously, over and over and over again, until we reach product market fit and hopefully beyond, because this process is what allows you to move really, really quickly. Okay, so remember we were talking about this, running lots and lots of small experiments to get to success faster, right? And this is what we're doing. We start with hypothesis. We're going through the 10 steps really, really fast, because each one of our experiments is small. Because the smaller the experiment, the faster we're learning. So the question I have for you is, who can tell me what we can use to test whether our hypotheses are true or false? So we have our experiments, we have our hypotheses, but how can we know whether they're true or false? What do we need? Who can guess that? A/B testing, focus groups, interviews, surveys, customer feedback. A/B testing starts with an M. What do we need? How are we going to know whether the experiment is good or not? What does every experiment have? For those of you who took science in school. Metrics, exactly. We need data and we need metrics. Metrics is what will help us define what success will look like for us. How each company defines success will be different. And of course, you will need to provide a timeline for your experiment to reach a specific success metric. This is so, so important. I've had 2 founders who went from different accelerators. They were learning a whole bunch of stuff, but they weren't, and they were running experiments, right? They were using some version of this, but they weren't using metrics So they were running experiments indefinitely, and they had no idea whether they were successful or not because they never defined success. So, so important. And eventually they burned out. They almost quit entrepreneurship because they couldn't figure it out, right? I don't want you to get into that point, and I want you to realize the importance of metrics. And what are you going to do if you're not hitting the metrics that you've defined? David says, been there. It's a very, very sad place to be. I feel for you, David. What are you going to do if you're not hitting the metrics that you've defined? Who can tell me? New experiments. Yes, Ken? Yes, exactly. Pivot. You guys are hitting it right on the nose. You pivot, you ask questions, you change direction. If you're not hitting your metrics, those are your signs that you need to check in, that you need to change something, that you need to refine or redefine, or you need to revisit and understand why you're not hitting those metrics. And something either on the product or the what side needs to be refined. The product or the what side needs to be refined? Market, exactly. You guys are all on top of it. I love it. Okay, so, or both, right? So this is where we're kind of tying everything together. We know that we need to iterate both on the product and the market side at exactly the same time. Metrics will allow us to set the success metric and the timeline. And if things are not working, if we're not reaching our success metrics, we need to either refine or iterate on the product or the market or both, right? We don't know. We need to understand, and then we need to make those changes, which is why earlier when I told you we need to structure our teams in a different way, why your team, who is responsible for the market and the product, needs to work together. Does that make sense? Excellent. I hope it does. Here are some baseline metrics. You need to figure out what are some baseline metrics for your industry, your business model, etc., so that you can understand how you compare to your competition and what types of goals you should have, right? So there's just too much to cover in a session right now, but these are some that you should be familiar with for different types of offers that you have. Okay, so and you can research specifically for your industry if there are specific baseline metrics that you should be hitting. Okay, and all of these steps will allow you to learn early, learn often, and learn cheap. We're optimizing our team and our process so you're not spending too much time and money going in the wrong direction. And the more tighter your team and process are, the better you're executing. It actually shortens your learning time through the hypothesis, test, learn, revise loop that I mentioned at the beginning. And of course, by learning early and often, you will increase your chances of hitting success and reach product market fit faster. And this is how much money you can save in product development costs if you use this learn early, learn often, learn cheap process. That's $124,000 for each release with just one developer. And the costs go astronomical as your team size increases. And if you're actually interested in seeing the breakdown of how I came up with all of these numbers, go to techspeak.co, which is my website, click on free classes, and there's a webinar there on demand called How to Cut Your Product Development Costs by Up to 50%. And then you'll see how I came up with these numbers, right? And I'm showing you this slide because it clearly illustrates that by learning early and often, you're not only reaching product market fit faster, but you're also cutting a lot of costs. And so there's some founders who are constantly in fundraising mode. If you are focusing on your process and how efficient you are with that, that reduces your need to constantly be in fundraising mode. Todd, I see your question. I'm going to look at that in a second. I just want to do a quick recap and then we'll go into the Q&A. Okay. All right. So what have you learned so far? Reaching product market fit quickly is really, really an important milestone because that allows you to scale. We also learn to use the lean way of building products so we can learn faster and iterate to success faster. Validate and prototype all of your ideas so you don't build more than you need to. Optimize your MVPs to reduce the cost and time of development so you can launch faster. To implement an efficient agile framework so you can release code even more faster than every 2 weeks so you can learn faster. And finally, to use data-driven decision-making to improving your products. And I'd love to know for you, right, which has been the most impactful for you so far? And that's going to be your go-to thing that you need to be able to action that you need to take post this webinar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all, or what combination of the 6? I would love to know. What has been the most impactful for you so far? Calvin says 2, 3, and 4. Great. Lots of, David says 2 and 6. Todd says 3. Excellent. Lots of people are saying 3. I love that. Such an important takeaway to validate and prototype all of your ideas. All right. So we'll go into a Q&A in just a minute. I'm going to mention some additional resources for those of you who might be interested. There's some free classes that I offer on TechSpeak. So just go to techspeak.co and click on free classes. You will see a bunch of different workshops that I offer. I also have a paid program called TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs Academy. It is teaching all the 10 steps that we talked about. And for those of you who downloaded the workbook, there's an exclusive offer for people in this community, in the Start Out community. You get 4 months in 4 months of coaching instead of 3 with that. So check out if this is of interest to you and you want to actually learn how to execute like this. And so there's resources for you there. We are also launching a TechSpeak 10-week accelerator where if you are in the idea stage and you want someone to pace you through this, right? It's based on the TechSpeak curriculum, but over 10 weeks, depending on where you are in the idea path or the MVP optimization path. Check that out. We actually will start our first cohort in 2 days. So if you're interested, reach out to me and let me know. But the information is on TechSpeak website. And again, the workbook, thank you, Daniel, for dropping that out again. So check out all the resources, do the work inside the workbook as well. All right, let's go into some questions. Let's see, how many people do we have? I think we can do, let's see, let's do questions live. If you want to ask, just unmute yourself and ask me a question. Let's do it that way since we're a smaller group.
Awesome. Thank you, Nelly. Yeah, if you would like to jump on camera or unmute yourself, please feel free. You can also drop it in the chat if you'd like. But we got about 10 more minutes to get some direct access with Nelly.
So Todd was asking a question, where can I learn more about prototyping? I've been doing validation and looking to jump directly to the MVP, but it would be better to test with prototypes before moving forward. Absolutely. So the tool that I would, so David mentioned a no-code tool. I would highly recommend to not go directly to no code. To me, it's to do no code tools still requires knowledge, especially if you're not technical. And it is writing code on the back end. Okay, so what I'm talking about is quick prototypes so that you can understand what needs to be refined. So the tools that I would use are Adobe XD, Figma, Sketch, those types of tools, and not necessarily no code at this point. Okay. Hopefully that helps, Todd, and feel free to answer your or ask another question. Great. Anybody else have questions about anything that I've said or anything related to their startups? I'm happy to provide the resources if I can. Nobody has questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
I think at this point it's like I don't have a a product and I'm in the process of building a prototype, but do you have other suggestions in terms of like during this interim process, what's the best way to start, like gaining traction? Like, is it social media posts? Is it like events to kind of get like the idea and the name out there, or just kind of,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's both. So to me, the market side of a lot of people start with the product. And then the big challenge, if you don't do sales right now while you're building your prototype and really understand specifically what messaging resonates, how to sell, like what are your customers finding valuable, why they would pay you money for that tool. That is what you can do. Well, you should be doing that ahead of time. Like if you follow this model or this methodology that I just taught you, you should have started with that. Okay. And if you haven't done all of that work, marketing, actually, this is the precursor before you can determine what type of marketing solutions you should be using, is that, right? You need to understand who you're selling to, who's your early adopter, where do they hang out? So if they're on TikTok, right, because you go in after younger audiences, then you should be on TikTok, right? And then a lot of the marketing strategies that you create would be there. If they're not on TikTok because they're a little bit older, right? Like you need to figure out where the people that you're going after hanging out. If you're targeting businesses, that's going to be a completely different marketing strategy. So that's why starting validation is not only going to help you understand what problem you're solving, it's also going to lay the foundation for your marketing efforts as well.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Let's see.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So our business is developing frontier tech. It's on the edge of tech, and finding the early adopter has been really hard. However, we've started to find some high pain points. I was wondering, is there words or cues that you have noticed that hint at high pain?
Yeah, they're opening up their wallet and paying you.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But I mean, before that, just
Yes.
before.
So this is, I'm going to give you an example of one of my students who did this, and it's so eye-opening for a lot of people as a story. So I'm going to share this story with you. Hopefully it'll be helpful. So he was in a B2B marketing space. He was selling to businesses, and he was, he did validation, he built a clickable prototype, and he was going to work with an outsourcing firm. And while all of the stuff, the relationship and the contracts were being figured out, he was on a coaching call one day, and he asked me, like, what can I do while I'm sitting and waiting for all of this to be figured out, which was going to be a couple of weeks. And I told him to go sell it. And he's like, what do you mean sell it? I just have a clickable prototype. And I encouraged them, he had a lot of fear around it, and it was just like, oh, I don't have a product, I don't know what it is. And so he went out, of course, and then sold it. And he got 7 letters of intent, signed contracts that when this product was built, they were going to be going to buy. Right? So letters of intent are one way where they're kind of opening their wallet, they're signing a contract. It's not actual money, but it's better than saying, we're going to look at this when it's ready. Okay, so that there's different levels. And then while he was also doing this, he realized that the value that they wanted was a very specific report. Okay, so while they all wanted the software solution, if 2 of this customers said, if you can provide me with this specific report, which he was able to deliver through an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yep.
He then, out of those 7, converted those 2 into paying customers before the software was ready. So figuring out, especially if you're talking to bigger companies, right? How can you get them to commit to anything rather than, like, because they can be talking and saying, well, yeah, we'll look at it when it's ready. but how can you get them to work with you? Because their pain point is so high. Sometimes you can get them to, I'll give you an example. The well-being solution that we built, we got paid by our first customer to build it for them.
Right.
Okay. So there is a lot of stuff that you can do in the early days with services and building it for them specifically. And they want to work with you because it's going to be, they're going to feel like it's a custom solution for them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you very much. I also recently had an experience of asking for a letter of intent from someone who said how much they would pay, and they said no, we're too small, and that's actually a good data point. So
yeah, absolutely. So now you need to go. Now you understand that they're too small, and you need to go up higher.
yeah.
Right? And bigger organizations. And so that's why with validation, you're actually understanding who to sell to, the exact persona of your early adopter, and those nuances, even the size of the company, the revenue of the company, where they're located, all of those could be important factors in you determining who to sell to at the beginning. Eventually you can expand, right? But you have a small team as a startup, you need to narrow down somewhere. It's going to be so much easier for you to market because you can specifically directly talk to them. You can create your sales materials specifically targeted towards those people. So the narrower you go at the beginning, the easier it is for you to be able to make sales, but also create, manage the whole process as a small team.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I also see a question from Chris here. Does anybody else want to ask a question? I'm going to quickly answer Chris's question. Curious about understanding how to understand metrics in a specific market. So there's baseline metrics, Chris, that I mentioned. Those baseline metrics will be specific to your industry, right? And that's what you need to be able to go after. But if you have, for example, a subscription type business, there is more data that's available for that. So that's what you want to go after. And then I think success is very specific to each company. If you are a well-funded company, how quickly you need to get to X, Y, and Z is going to be different than if you're, let's say, a bootstrap company with 2 co-founders. So success is relative, which is why I always say define your success and know and understand the timeline for which you need to reach it. And as long as you're satisfied with how quickly you're moving, then you are successful. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have a follow-up question, feel free to unmute, and I'm happy to
Thank
talk
you.
about it.
That answers it. Thank you.
Great. Ken is also mentioned, it feels like the average consumer has increased expectations around how tech looks and functions. I understand how important it is to iterate quickly, but how much investment needs to be made to be good enough to even be given a fair chance of assessment and feedback? That's a great question. And Ken, when I say moving quickly, it doesn't mean crappy product. It doesn't mean really bad user interface. It's so easy nowadays to make really beautiful interfaces really quickly, right? And so I think that's a big misunderstanding that people have around MVPs. They think that MVPs, which stands for minimal viable product, is of something that doesn't work or is buggy. And sometimes that means it's not perfect, right? But it doesn't mean that it's not usable. You should still be thinking about that. And I hope that answers your question, because everything that we release, for example, we worked with an enterprise company. It looks great. It looks beautiful. We pay attention to it. We gave it some time. But now when we release new products, we already know the aesthetics that we're going after. So we already have that defined and iterating really quickly on that. I don't know if that, again, Ken, if you have a follow-up question on that, feel free to unmute, and I'm happy to dive into deeper.
Perfect.
Well, one of the things that I've just, the follow-up is, as a non-coder myself, right, running a company, you need to hire contractors. And a lot of the times when you're looking to reduce costs, a lot of those contractors are foreign. And there are a lot of communication issues or documentation issues if I were to hire a freelancer versus a team. So I'm just trying to understand, how can you keep costs low, still delivering a strong product and a good turnover while getting like useful feedback that can be iterated?
Yeah. And
That
so
was a good answer to my previous question.
excellent. And there's a lot of resources. And one of the reasons why I started teaching the process that I teach to a lot of non-technical founders is because what you need to realize as you're working with freelancers and outsourced development shops is that someone on your team needs to play the product role and the project management role. And oftentimes in the beginning, because you don't have early founders, right? Early stage founders don't have the money to pay full-time people for those roles. The biggest mistakes that happen with miscommunications is because the founder doesn't know how to set those expectations, how to hire the right people, right? And how to manage that whole process. And that's what I essentially want you to learn and own. And then you can work with outside cheap talent all over the world, but you know exactly how to give them the instructions. Like, for example, I would never do, if you outsource to India, I would never have them do user experience because it's just like, I've tried it, I've done it, and it's just terrible. Right. So I would maybe work with people and whose aesthetics I like, right? And get that person in place to do the design, and then you can do the development in other areas. Hopefully that is helpful.
Awesome. Well, Nelly, thank you so much for your time. Again, I hope that everybody found this as helpful as we do in our community. In the chat, you will find the link to the other sessions that we have had with Nelly that have links to the recording. Again, Nelly, thank you so much for your time. We are excited to be working with you and look forward to the next set of sessions that we can work with you on. Expect the recording in the next couple of days, and thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
You are welcome. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.